Everyone has a dream, a star they wanted to reach at least once in their lives. Those who try to pursue that dream are very few in number, and those who actually catch it are even fewer. But at the start of our story, that star was nothing more than a balloon, being rescued from a tree by the protagonist. He seems distracted and falls to the ground, worrying the little owner of the balloon and his mother. However, the guy keeps a smile on his face despite the fall and returns the balloon, asking the kid to be more careful next time. He thanks the boy for the experience since it inspired him with new ideas for his manga, and takes his leave, leaving the child's mother wondering what he meant by that. We are transported to the Shueisha building, specifically the editorial department of Weekly Shonen Jump. The person we met earlier is Teppei Sasaki, a 24-year-old guy striving to achieve his dream of becoming a mangaka in Shonen Jump. He's currently in a meeting with his editor in the meeting space next to the editorial room. To reach his dream, he has to follow a process. First win a rookie prize, then publish a one-shot, and finally get the approval to start a new series. When he was 20, he earned a runner-up prize in a rookie contest, and after that moved to Tokyo to work as an assistant for professional mangakas. He's been doing that for 4 years and still hasn't passed the approval stage to get a one-shot. He knows that if he wants his manga published, he first needs to impress the editor in front of him with his storyboard. The process starts with editors approving storyboards, which are then taken to a selection meeting, and only the best of them earn the right to be published as one-shots. Teppei has been stuck in the first step for 4 years with the same editor, but now he's certain that his storyboard won't be rejected since he took 2 entire months to refine it. However, the editor remains unfazed and drops the pages, saying that the story is terrible. Teppei is left dumbfounded, and the editor continues, saying that objectively it isn't bad, but it doesn't have anything remarkable either. Sadly, Teppei's storyboard gets rejected once again. The editor tells him that his problem is creating stories that are too ordinary. He should try to make something only he could draw. And with that, the editor finishes by saying he won't take that work to the selection meeting and prepares to leave, mentioning that he has a lot to do. But Teppei doesn't give up and begs the editor for another chance. He promises that he'll have a new 47-page storyboard ready by tomorrow. Clearly annoyed, the editor accepts, but he'll only look at it if Teppei presents his work at 1 o'clock sharp. Teppei thanks him and immediately rushes out of the building. Now at his home, he starts drawing the pages of his new manga. He's working so diligently because he wants his work to enter a selection meeting that focuses on one-shots from newcomers, which will be held in 2 days. He'll turn 25 in 3 days, right after the selection meeting, and he is starting to feel the weight of seeing his old friends with steady jobs, wondering how long he can keep chasing that star of his dreams. Morning arrives and he looks completely drained but happy for having managed to draw a new storyboard. He analyzes it, and this time, he truly believes it will pass the test. But it's already 11 a.m. and he rushes out of the house. Teppei starts running toward the train station and barely gets on his train, trying to focus on not falling asleep before getting to his stop. We go back to the Shueisha building, and Teppei thanks his editor again for the second chance. This time, Teppei notices that the reading speed of his editor is much slower, and when he finishes reading, Teppei asks how it was. The editor simply says that the story is completely empty, shattering Teppei's hopes. The editor asks what he finds interesting about his work, and Teppei, with a shaky voice, says that he tried to make the characters unique and quirky, but the editor counters by saying that his characters were so typical that even he could draw them, and asks Teppei if he has something unique, something only he could create. Teppei only says that he just wants to make something that many people could enjoy. The editor tells him that readers won't enjoy something any random person could make. He should try to create bizarre characters and topics to at least capture a niche audience. Teppei is shaking in frustration, but reaffirms that he wants to create something everyone could enjoy. The editor has had enough. He stands from his chair and advises Teppei to return home if he's so determined to keep making that kind of content and get compliments for it, completely shattering Teppei's dreams. Teppei exits the building, drained of motivation and happiness. It starts raining, and he knows that buying an umbrella would cost him 5 days of his food budget. He arrives at his house and drops to the floor, his eyes completely empty. He remembers the moment he told his mom about manga school and her asking if that could actually give him a real job. The moment he got the runner-up prize in the rookie category, and a close friend of his giving him a little robot to congratulate him. The moment when he left home and started from scratch in Tokyo. Countless pages drawn, countless moments where he had to lie to his mom, pretending that everything was working out for him. He lays on the floor, defeated, just inches away from saying that he gives up. Those words are about to leave his mouth, but before he can finish, a lightning bolt strikes directly on his house, giving him the scare of his life. He notices that his microwave and fridge were hit and are now on fire. He rushes with a bucket of water to put out the flames but doesn't make it in time. and they end up melted together. Even his little robot got destroyed. He drops to the floor, wondering why that had to happen right when he was about to give up. But suddenly, a ding from the microwave startles him. He gets nervous, wondering what he was heating before the lightning, and how the microwave managed to keep working despite it. He approaches cautiously, wanting to see the reason for the sound. Upon opening the microwave, Teppei is left speechless upon seeing a volume of Shonen Jump inside. He grabs it and starts checking it. The first thing that catches his attention is the date. It says 2030, but his calendar shows it's 2020. He drops the volume in fear, thinking he's going crazy. He starts laughing maniacally, asking the melted robot if it's because of its power. But Teppei knows that's impossible. He inspects the volume to check if it's some hidden camera prank and they just made a fake cover for the magazine. He starts reading the pages and his doubts begin to fade. He doesn't recognize any of the mangas displayed inside. He closes it and takes a better look at the cover. It shows a new series called White Knight by Itsuki Aino, apparently a new artist from 10 years in the future. Teppei starts reading White Knight, and the content amazes him, bringing him back to life. Minutes pass and he stands, walking toward the door without saying a word. Upon exiting, he starts yelling at the stormy sky. He can't believe how a new story can be that perfect, to the point of making him cry with its first chapter. He trembles just by recalling its content and rushes inside his house to read it again. However, upon returning to the microwave, he notices that it's gone, and he searches his whole house for it, but finds nothing. He snaps back to reality. Of course, a time-traveling Shonen Jump doesn't exist. It was probably just a hallucination caused by his all-nighters. But even if that's the case, he can't deny the fact that White Knight is an absolute masterpiece. He rushes back to his drawing desk to start working. He only needs to put on paper what his brain just created subconsciously, the manga of his dreams. Morning arrives and he's back at the Shueisha building. Exhausted from not sleeping 2 days in a row, Teppei calls his editor and asks for one more chance. If it doesn't get approved, he will quit manga entirely. The editor doesn't care since the deadline was yesterday and hangs up. Teppei doesn't give up and enters the building, but when a security guard asks for his entry pass, he starts running. He manages to reach the editorial department, surprising the editor, whose name is revealed to be Kikuse. Teppei bows in front of everyone and begs him to give a final look at his work. He starts crying, pleading for one last chance, but Kikuse has had enough and slaps his work, sending all the pages flying while yelling that Teppei has no talent and should quit. All these years, the editor had met with Teppei out of social obligation, but he can't take it anymore. He yells that it's impossible for Teppei to become a real mangaka. Suddenly, the editor-in-chief appears and starts picking up the pages. Under the surprised gazes of Teppei and Kikuse, the editor-in-chief sarcastically commends Kikuse for being able to tell who has talent and who doesn't, something he still isn't capable of, despite being in the business for 20 years. The editor-in-chief can't condone Teppei barging into the building, but is still intrigued by the reason that made him go to such extremes. Teppei starts crying, saying he has spent too much time trying to become a mangaka, and if this final work doesn't help him, he won't try anymore. Everyone remains silent in the room, and the editor-in-chief can't ignore the fact that Teppei just committed a crime. But he still decides to give the storyboard a read. After all, the manga isn't responsible for its author's actions. He even adds that he enjoyed Teppei's work in the rookie contest, surprising him. He flips through the pages under Teppei's nervous gaze, and after a couple of minutes, the editor-in-chief admits that the work can't be published in a special issue, breaking Teppei's hopes once more. Suddenly, the editor-in-chief stands, declaring that the storyboard should go straight into Shonen Jump since it's a masterpiece. Everyone in the editorial department is astonished, unable to believe that the editor-in-chief was impressed by a submission. The other editors start reading the storyboard, completely amazed by the masterpiece a rookie just created. Even Kikuse can't believe the same Teppei made such a story. Since everyone seems happy with the decision, the editor-in-chief tells another editor named Munoka to work with Teppei from that day on. Kikuse is shocked that the editor-in-chief didn't pick him for the job, but he replies that he heard Kikuse didn't want to get involved with Teppei again. Munoka greets Teppei, hoping to work together for a long time. But before Teppei can say anything, he collapses to the ground, happy to know that he has finally made his debut. A while later, Teppei decides to return to his countryside home to work on the one-shot of White Knight, having his old classmates help him with the backgrounds and screen tones. The release of the one-shot is a complete success, and Teppei stays in his countryside house to celebrate, unaware that his microwave is still producing more issues of Shonen Jump from 10 years in the future. We now move to Kochi Prefecture, specifically to a house where a girl named Itsuki Aino is reading the latest issue of Shonen Jump, surprised to see her White Knight displayed there. She is the same Itsuki Aino that Teppei saw in the first issue of Shonen Jump that his microwave produced. She fills with fury, seeing how the work she spent so much time on is being published by another person in Shonen Jump. Teppei returns to his house in Tokyo and is surprised by what he sees. An issue of Shonen Jump is materializing inside the microwave right before his eyes. He checks his bag and takes out the magazine with his one-shot, realizing that he plagiarized someone else's story. He yells in regret, trying to justify himself by thinking he isn't hurting anybody. After all, it's a manga from 10 years in the future, but the guilt still gnaws at him. Just then, the microwave dings again, revealing a new volume. Teppei's mind races. He wonders if he's just changed the future, since White Knight shouldn't exist anymore. But when he checks the new issue's credits, the author's name still reads Itsuki Aino. The only explanation is that the timelines have diverged ever since he picked up that first issue from the microwave. He collapses to the floor, struggling to understand why this is happening to him and what he should do next. Teppei can't help but recall his mother crying tears of joy after reading his one-shot. Kikuse, his former editor, apologizing for all the harsh things he'd said, and the heartfelt encouragement from his friend Okano. Those words feel like knives now, because none of it was his own creation. He's still the same Teppei who failed for 4 years straight. Making up his mind, he grabs a pair of scissors. It's still possible to prevent further damage and create something entirely his own. He decides he must put a stop to this, cut the microwave's power cord, and take the secret to his grave. But suddenly, his phone rings and he rushes to answer. It's Munioka, asking how his new storyboard is going. Teppei admits he hasn't finished it, but Munioka doesn't seem concerned. He simply reminds Teppei that they'll meet at 6 o'clock to discuss White Knight's serialization in Shonen Jump. Teppei had completely forgotten about the meeting. Now he has to think of an excuse for why he can't keep drawing the manga. He glares at his time machine again, but decides to destroy it later. He's already running late. Teppei and Munioka meet at a restaurant, raising their glasses to the success of White Knight's one-shot. Munioka asks again about the storyboards, and Teppei knows it's the perfect time to speak up. He apologizes, explaining that he only intended White Knight as a short story and would like to start over with a new idea. Munioka reacts instantly. Not serializing such a masterpiece, he says, would be a terrible waste. Inside, Teppei is terrified, but not surprised. The ending of his one-shot clearly hinted at a continuation. Still, he knows no one would believe the truth, that he stole the story from a Shonen Jump 10 years in the future. The only thing he can say is that he no longer has the desire to draw it. Munioka refuses to give up. He asks Teppei what will happen to his characters. Will he just abandon them without letting them achieve their dreams? For Munioka, the characters aren't just tools to sell books. They are alive on the page. The ink is their oxygen, and they breathe within the hearts of the readers. Teppei starts crying out of frustration. He would be happy if all this praise were for something he actually made, but he has already decided to stop. Before he can respond, Munioka drops a huge bag on the table. Inside is something Teppei can hardly believe. Fan mail. Munioka confirms that they've never received so much for a one-shot. Teppei starts reading, feeling the passion and emotion of the people who read his story. Munioka continues. He might not understand what's going on in Teppei's heart, and he won't force him, but he thinks Teppei is just afraid. The choice to continue drawing is ultimately Teppei's, but no matter how long it takes, they will all be waiting for the rest of the story. Back at his house, Teppei reads through all the new issues the microwave has produced. He's stunned by what he's seeing. White Knight feels like an instant classic. Every chapter outshines the last. Every setup and reveal lands like a groundbreaking moment. After finishing them all, he lies down and cries. But now is not the time to wallow. He must start drawing. Once again, he spends the whole night working, page after page, without rest. When he finally presents the storyboard, Munioka falls out of his chair, overwhelmed by such a divine piece of work. Teppei has made his decision. He doesn't know why White Knight was sent to him from the future, but he will bear the weight of the guilt and bring the story into the world until it's complete. Leaving the building, he wonders where Itsuki Aino is now. He tries to ease his conscience by telling himself that such a genius could surely create another masterpiece. But right at that moment, a mysterious girl calls to him. She asks if he is Teppei Sasaki. He confirms, wondering who this student is. The girl introduces herself. She is Itsuki Aino, and she's glad to finally meet him. At those words, Teppei starts trembling like jelly. He realizes that standing before him is the true author of the future masterpiece, White Knight. Teppei tries to calm down, thinking she might just be another person with the same name. Itsuki doesn't waste time and shows him her storyboard of White Knight she has been working on. Teppei reads through the pages, and although it's not as polished as the version from 10 years in the future, the title and setting are almost identical. Believing his end is near, Teppei starts rambling, and Itsuki tries to make sense of his reaction. She finally speaks, thinking she now understands his words, and Teppei is terrified because he believes she just read his mind. Itsuki's expression darkens, and she begins pulling something out of her suitcase. She takes out a G-pen and points it at him, and the first thing Teppei thinks is that she wants to kill him. He begs her not to do something she will regret, but Itsuki is puzzled by his words. Teppei starts running in panic, shouting that he doesn't want her to become a murderer, while Itsuki is left standing there, bewildered. She gives chase while Teppei keeps fleeing, but he trips and crashes to the ground. Itsuki doesn't hesitate and seizes the moment to leap at him. She manages to pin him down and thrusts her G-pen toward Teppei's face, but he manages to block her. Itsuki only wants to know why he is running away, but Teppei begs her again to stop. He finally blurts out, yelling that he knows Itsuki wants to kill him and that he doesn't want to steal more of her future. These last words make her think that Teppei spied on her storyboards while she was asleep. But Teppei insists he never did anything like that, though she doesn't believe him. It would be far too much of a coincidence for him to write with the same title and story. This becomes too much for Teppei, and he admits that it all happened because of a time machine. Lightning struck his house and fused his fridge and microwave together, creating a time machine that spits out issues of Shonen Jump from 10 years in the future. Itsuki gets furious and yells at him for trying to flaunt his so-called genius with a ridiculous joke. Does he think she's an idiot? She reveals that she spent all her time shut in her room, writing the story in a countryside house in Kochi Prefecture. She asks if there is something that only he can draw. She believes it's possible they could have ended up creating the same manga by coincidence if they share the same values. But even so, there must be something only he can produce. Or perhaps there's nothing at all, and he is just an empty human being. That word was like a curse to him, something he had heard since the beginning of his journey as a mangaka. When he was in 3rd grade, he started drawing, and everything came easily since his friends loved his stories. But when he began drawing seriously in middle school, people started saying his stories were unoriginal and hollow. Even in manga school, the teachers urged him to find his own style, something only he could create. When he won the Rookie Runner-Up Prize, the feedback was the same. Good, but lacking originality and uniqueness. Teppei finally understands. No matter how much he tries, he will always be empty inside. Itsuki asks again why he isn't saying anything. Doesn't he have something to tell his readers? Teppei's mind races. He needs to say something only a genius could say. This is the moment for a ghostwriter to shine. He spreads his arms and yells that there's nothing. There's nothing he and only he can draw or say. But he knows that even someone as empty as him can create good manga, something everyone can enjoy. With tears in his eyes, he apologizes to Itsuki. That's the only answer he can give her, and she should stop since she still has a bright future. With a radiant smile, Itsuki reveals that she is in the same position as him. She too has nothing at all. She admits that she was always clumsy and dull, so she was bullied. But even then, she wanted to make people happy and began drawing manga. Teppei starts to feel bad for all she endured, but Itsuki keeps smiling, saying she even wanted her bullies to feel happy when reading her manga, that there are better things in life than bullying others. Her dream from the start was to entertain humanity with her stories. She opens up, saying it's ridiculous that manga contests demand something unique when, in reality, readers just want to enjoy a good story. She lunges at Teppei, asking if he agrees. He confirms, and Itsuki is overjoyed. She has finally found someone like her, and that must be why they came up with the same idea for the manga. However, she knows Teppei is already a professional while she is barely an amateur. Even so, she challenges him, promising that in the future she'll create a manga far better than White Knight and will surpass him. And that's why she will leave White Knight in his hands. So he should prepare for the day they fight for real. Saying that, Itsuki runs off while Teppei tries to stop her. He can't believe the genius Itsuki Ano just acted like a shonen hero and then ran away. But he doesn't have time to waste. His series in Shonen Jump is about to begin. Now Teppei is in his studio, recalling the way he met Itsuki Ano and how he wanted to tell her the truth, but now he is the only one who can bring White Knight to the world. Now that he is a professional, he is in a constant battle against time. In just 7 days, he must complete a new chapter for his readers. And that's why Munaka will introduce Teppei to a group of skilled assistants who will help him with White Knight. The first one is Genki Akaishi, an energetic guy eager to become an assistant for such an incredible manga. Then comes Jiro Yamane, a chief assistant with plenty of experience under his belt. Next is Hajime Igarashi, a reserved individual who has already debuted with a one-shot. And finally, Itsuki Aino, the author of White Knight in 10 years, who promises she will help him improve the story they both were writing at the same time. Upon seeing her, Teppei freezes and loudly asks what she is doing in his studio. Muneoka reveals that he posted an ad for an assistant on the internet and quickly found her. Inwardly, Teppei is nervous again. He never expected to meet her again so soon. Suddenly, Jiro asks Itsuki what she meant by drawing the same manga, and she casually reveals that she was working on a story with the same title and concept as Teppei's. But Genki joins in, calling her a liar and refusing to believe someone else could create such a masterpiece. The two glare at each other with hostility, creating tension in the room as Jiro tries to calm them down. Teppei steps in and asks Itsuki if she is serious about becoming his assistant. Itsuki doesn't hesitate and confirms her wish with a proud face, unwilling to leave the only person who resembles her. But in a second, she shifts completely, her expression turning gloomy, admitting she felt frustrated upon seeing how much better Teppei's version of White Knight was. But even then, as someone who thinks like him, she feels responsible for using all her strength to support him. She wants to train under Teppei's guidance in order to create something far greater than White Knight. Genki jumps at her again, telling her to stop saying disrespectful things to Teppei, while Itsuki yells at him for being rude to her. They keep bickering, and Genki starts doubting if she's really an assistant since it seems she still goes to school. Itsuki admits she quit to move to Tokyo, worrying Teppei. Suddenly, Muneoka interrupts them, saying he'll show everyone Itsuki's work. Everyone reads through the pages, amazed by their content. Even Genki can't hide his admiration. They start calling her a prodigy, but what surprises Teppei the most is how quickly they accept her into the group. Muneoka concludes by saying that Itsuki is a future talent for Shonen Jump, and now everything is in Teppei's hands. Teppei gazes at her with some sadness. He wanted to reveal the truth, but didn't have the courage. Maybe she would have stopped drawing manga after learning it. But those thoughts vanish when Itsuki extends her hand to him, happy to work for someone like him. Teppei feels the same and decides to keep hiding the secret, knowing this way she'll keep moving toward her dream. For now, he must start working. He will handle the characters and the main portions of the scenes, while the assistants will work on the backgrounds and touch-ups. At this point, Itsuki is very good, but upon checking the future volumes, he knows how incredible she'll become in 10 years. No matter how hard he tries, all his drawings feel like cheap imitations of the original work. He gets frustrated and crumples his sketches. He sees it as disrespect toward the future Itsuki. For an instant, he considers making Itsuki draw the manga, but the idea is absurd. She would have to read the future manga and then recreate it with 10 years less experience, and she probably wouldn't want to do that. Teppei discards the thought and decides to take full responsibility. He will have to bring White Knight to life and push his art as close as possible to the real volumes. 3 weeks pass, and there are only 19 days left until the first chapter's deadline. The 4 assistants are heading to Teppei's studio, with Itsuki and Genki arguing as usual. Upon opening the door, they realize how hot the studio is, and despite that, Teppei doesn't seem bothered at all. It's so hot that their popsicles melt in seconds. Jiro approaches Teppei and tries to bring him back to reality, startling him. He was immersed in his pages. Jiro asks how the manga is going. They should already be starting on the backgrounds for the character art. However, Teppei admits that he hasn't finished a single page yet, shocking everyone except Jiro, who remains calm and asks what happened. Teppei explains that he already drew the 54 pages, but the art is far from top quality, so he is redoing everything. Genki and Jiro start reading the pages scattered on the floor and can't help but compliment his style. But for Teppei, it's still not enough. He can't show those pages to readers. Teppei drops to the floor and begs them to let him redraw everything, despite the deadline being so close. Genki is moved by his words, and with fire in his eyes, he promises to stay with him until he finishes. Itsuki is still unsure about Teppei's decision, but Genki believes that with guts, he'll make it through. However, Hajime points out that guts alone can't magically solve their problems. He cannot miss the deadline, especially for the first chapter of his series. Suddenly, Jiro proposes the perfect solution. He tells everyone to draw the backgrounds first using the unsatisfactory version of White Knight, and then combine everything digitally with Teppei's polished character art. He estimates they could meet the deadline if Teppei finishes in 10 days. All the assistants praise Jiro's idea. After all, he used to work as a chief assistant. Teppei is so touched that he can't help but cry and thank them. The assistants remind him they are a team and want to work as hard as he is right now. 10 days pass, and everyone is amazed at the final pages drawn by Teppei. He finally feels like he's honoring the original work by Itsuki Aino. He asks Itsuki what she thinks about his final drawings, catching her off guard. With a smile, she tells him they are great, practically perfect. However, Teppei feels something is still off. Upon receiving the pages from Itsuki's hands, he feels he's still too far from the real art and tears them apart in front of his stunned assistants. Teppei stands there over the torn pages, shouting that he's still too far, while his assistants can't believe they are only 9 days away from the deadline and still don't have a single finished page. Genki is the first to speak, asking why Teppei is destroying his work. Teppei keeps tearing the pages, saying the art is still not good enough. Genki tries to bring him back, insisting that everyone thought it was already perfect. Even Itsuki said so. Teppei grabs Itsuki and begs her to be completely honest with him. Deep down, he feels responsible for taking care of what she was meant to draw in the future. He feels that way because he essentially stole the actual manga from his own timeline. Teppei asks her again if his work was truly good enough, telling her she can be brutally honest. Itsuki puts on a big smile, blaming herself for being a bad liar. She feels happy, certain that she and Teppei are alike, and that he saw through her false praise. Suddenly, Munoka enters the studio holding a bag of takoyaki, eager to check the character art. He knew Teppei wanted to redraw everything, but since they are still on schedule, he sees no problem. He asks where the material is, and Genki points at a mountain of torn pages. Munoka yells in shock upon seeing the manga completely shredded, demanding to know what happened. Teppei doesn't flinch and again asks to redraw all the character art, but Munoka refuses. Teppei pleads, but Munoka reminds him there are only 9 days left until the deadline and that the pages are already more than perfect. Teppei bows, asking for one last chance. His drawings are still missing something, and until he figures it out, he can't give White Knight to the readers. Against his better judgment, Munoka accepts, but sets one condition. Teppei must figure out what his art is missing by 6 o'clock in the morning. If he fails, they will use the first draft, the one he's least satisfied with, and send it to print. Teppei agrees to the deal, promising to give his all. Once alone in the studio, Teppei decides to photocopy the real issue of the future Shonen Jump and trace it. Hours pass, but even after doing that, he still dislikes the results. The drawings have no soul. They're just hollow imitations. At that moment, there's a knock at the door. When Teppei opens it, he sees Itsuki and asks why she's there so late. She tells him she came to say he was a bird, leaving him confused. Itsuki explains that he's like a bird flying freely, tied to nothing. After that, she wishes him good luck before turning to leave. Teppei calls out, asking her directly what his version of White Knight is missing. She turns with a smile, wondering why he's asking her that. Teppei gets nervous and says it's because her drawings of White Knight were amazing, and that he also thinks they're two of a kind, making her happy. However, Itsuki says she doesn't have an answer. After all, this work is Teppei's White Knight. She admits she originally thought she could become his assistant just because they were making something similar and that her opinions could improve the story. But after watching him work diligently, she realized White Knight belongs to Teppei. She appreciates his concern but tells him to focus on his own ideas. Itsuki ends by saying he should draw White Knight the way he feels is right, in order to make a manga that truly suits him. Hearing those words, Teppei remembers how he felt when drawing the one-shot. He wanted to create something that could entertain as many people as possible. He finally breaks free from the cage he put himself in, and thanks Itsuki for helping him find his way. She replies with a smile, excited to see Teppei's version of White Knight. The hours pass as Teppei keeps working, thinking about how Itsuki's words made him realize he's been trying to replicate her style all this time. But he isn't Itsuki, he's Teppei, and if he wants to continue drawing White Knight, he'll have to do it in his own style. 9 days later, the deadline arrives. When Munoka checks the character art, he can't help but cry with joy. The assistants are also impressed with the final result, and Jiro comments that he's glad Teppei used the same style from his one-shot. Munoka agrees, saying the characters feel truly alive, and congratulates Teppei for completing his first chapter. Teppei bows, apologizing for all the trouble he caused them, but everyone is overjoyed. In the end, it was all worth it. Itsuki steps forward and proudly says, Teppei's manga is good but still far from her level. This makes Genki angry as usual, but Itsuki stands firm because she and Teppei are rivals. Teppei asks her once again for her opinion, and she stoically says it's still far from perfect. However, with a genuine smile, she adds that it's still truly amazing, finally making Teppei smile as well. We are taken to Teppei's house. Every Monday at 4:59 p.m., the time machine begins bringing a new volume from the future. Exactly at 5 p.m., the machine dings, and the volume is complete. From that moment, Teppei's work begins. He must take the future masterpiece and redraw it entirely so everyone can read it. He reads the latest volume, impressed by how the story keeps improving, until something catches his eye. The next volume of White Knight will have 3 consecutive issues, all in full color. Teppei can't believe that after only 15 chapters, White Knight achieved something like that. The editorial team must be thrilled with the survey results. He hopes that his own version of White Knight will earn similar success, easing the weight of his responsibility. August 31st finally arrives, marking the start of White Knight's serialization in Shonen Jump. Munioka appears in the studio and happily announces that they got first place in the survey results. Everyone is ecstatic, but Teppei remains calm. So far, things are going well, but he hopes his art won't drag the story down. In October, Munioka tells them they ranked second, making everyone jump in excitement once again. He even mentions they received an offer for an anime adaptation. By November, the first volume of White Knight hits the shelves, selling out in record time. Teppei, once worried about its success, sees it surpass his expectations, strengthening his resolve to carry White Knight all the way to the end. December comes, and Genki asks Teppei why he always eats instant ramen despite being able to afford better meals. Suddenly, Munioka arrives with great news. Itsuki has been selected for a Tezuka Award. Everyone congratulates her, even Genki, who won the runner-up prize. Teppei also congratulates her, drawing a huge smile from Itsuki. She strikes a shonen hero pose and once again promises to surpass Teppei very soon. They decide to celebrate Itsuki's award at a Korean barbecue restaurant. Itsuki enjoys the meat, even taking the pieces Genki was cooking for himself. Genki notices that Teppei is only eating cabbage, and Teppei replies that he doesn't deserve to eat meat. Jiro and Itsuki comment on his tendency to belittle himself, calling it a mystery. Suddenly, Hajime asks Teppei if he can sit beside him. Teppei agrees and asks what's on his mind. Hajime admits there was a time when he gave up on becoming a mangaka. Nothing was working out, his drafts were constantly rejected, and eventually he couldn't draw anymore. But when he was at his lowest, he read the White Knight one-shot. It reminded him of the true essence of manga and inspired him to start creating again. Hajime smiles, thanking Teppei for reigniting his motivation. He senses something is bothering Teppei, but reminds him that his manga has helped many people. Teppei is moved by his words and thanks him, while Hajime returns to his reserved self. Teppei closes his eyes, thinking that maybe drawing White Knight in this timeline has more meaning than he first thought. He ends up falling asleep, and Jiro tells Itsuki they should let him rest. After a while, Teppei wakes and notices everyone else is sleeping, except Itsuki, who is drawing ideas on napkins. Teppei looks at her, sensing her determination. Despite winning a Tezuka Award, she's already working on new concepts. Inwardly, he apologizes, wishing he could go back in time to tell her the truth, but he knows that revealing it might make her stop drawing manga, so he can't. Itsuki notices Teppei is awake and sees him crying. Concerned, she asks what's wrong. Teppei blames the smoke from the grill, but it's not even on, and it's not pollen season either. He tells her he has something for her, something more useful to her than to himself. He hands her a sketchbook, and she's overjoyed. Now she can draw anywhere, and she promises to treasure it like a family heirloom. Teppei wishes her luck with her new draft and promises to read it once it's complete. He recalls that a Shonen Jump issue from 10 years in the future stated that White Knight was Itsuki's debut. He hopes she creates something even greater, so her dream of entertaining everyone through her manga becomes reality. Innocently, Itsuki asks if drawing a weekly manga is difficult. Teppei realizes he shouldn't let her see his stress. He must protect her dream. With a thumbs up, he tells her it's tough, but also incredibly fun. Itsuki smiles in response. The months pass, with everyone giving their all for White Knight. By April, Teppei stands before the time machine, waiting for the next issue of Shonen Jump. It's been almost a year since lightning struck his house, and at this point, the anime for the future White Knight had already been announced. He figures that if his version captures readers' hearts the same way, an anime should be announced in about 2.5 months. Suddenly, Munioka calls, happily revealing that White Knight has been confirmed for an anime series. He adds that the official announcement won't come until next year, and it will likely air in about 1.5 years, making Teppei slightly disappointed as it's longer than he expected. Still, with his art managing to charm readers, all he can do now is give his best to make it work. No matter what happens, he will draw White Knight to the very end. Then he looks at the time machine and freezes in shock. It's already 5:06 p.m. on a Monday, and the new volume still hasn't appeared. Teppei waited until midnight, but the future volume never appeared. He kept working, though his mind was constantly dwelling on the sudden change, wondering about the cause for Shonen Jump to skip its weekly release. Teppei knows that trying to figure out the reason is futile. There's still a chance that an actual volume appears next week. He has a reserve of 12 future issues to keep working on, but he fears that if a new one never arrives, he won't just have to draw them. Instead, he'll need to think about how to continue the story. Teppei is aware that he will be unable to do it. He already considers his art a downgrade, but continuing the story would be far worse, especially after reading the latest chapter. The next Monday finally arrives and Teppei is watching the time machine, pleading for a new volume to appear. The clock hits 5 o'clock and a future issue begins materializing, easing Teppei's fears. He still doesn't know why Shonen Jump skipped an issue, but apparently everything has returned to normal. Teppei opens the Shonen Jump, and an in memoriam page appears, stating that Itsuki Aino has passed away on April 6, 2031, and the last chapter of White Knight will be the final one. Teppei freezes, trying to process what he just read. It can't be true. He's certain he's just dreaming. He breaks down, tears streaming from his eyes. There's no way Itsuki dies just like that. He yells in desperation, insisting that Itsuki is too young to die. It must be a lie. He stays in his room until nightfall, staring at the future volume of Shonen Jump. In 10 years, Itsuki will die at 28, right when White Knight was just starting. He tries to think about what happened to her in the original timeline, and a thought crosses his mind. What will happen to Itsuki in the current timeline? Is she destined to suffer the same fate as in the original and die in 10 years? But since he changed the timeline by drawing White Knight, maybe that alteration will allow her to escape her early death. Teppei wonders if the reason why Shonen Jump from the future started appearing was so that he could change the future into one where Itsuki doesn't die. However, what is he supposed to do if that's true? Should he simply let White Knight end prematurely? Teppei considers that maybe there was another reason to keep drawing White Knight besides saving Itsuki, but he immediately dismisses that thought. The machine would have chosen someone capable of completing the manga. He isn't even sure if he has truly altered the future where Itsuki dies, and he has no idea what to do. At that moment, the melter robot resting over the microwave starts making noises and finally yells, "Future Thunder." Immediately after, the microwave bursts open, releasing an energy ball that startles Teppei. The energy shoots out of the microwave and strikes the fridge door. It leaves a message where an unknown person asks Teppei to keep drawing White Knight and save Itsuki, since the cause of her death has not yet been removed. Teppei is beyond stunned upon reading the message. Now, he has the mission to lead everyone toward a future that was never meant to exist, a future where Itsuki Aino is saved. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.